All right, then. Thank you for that effort in putting together a brief pictures and videos to our past over the last 65 years or so. Let's get perspectives into all of these. And one thing that is important to know is that we all as a people need to take home a lesson. And I like to craft these conversations in such a way that we look at our nation, look at the problem, and look at for the solution. The government and the executive, the National Assembly, and we the people might be able to make an informed decision about the way forward for our people. And that's why we're very selective in the kind of guests that we have on the program tonight. So let me begin by with the conversation on what exactly is broken in the structure. Particularly when we're thinking about who to invite. One name came to mind, and it's one man that's particularly participated in the alteration of our constitution almost from the very first one to the fifth alteration. He's worked with National Assembly members. He's done a lot of policy advisory and consultation. He knows where the problem is. He knows where the shoe pinches. He's in fact as old as a nation. He's Clement Nwankwo. He's a constitutional lawyer and executive director of PLAC. Thanks so much indeed for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Sean.
And happy Independence Day to you.
I wish you the same, and I wish our viewers, Nigerians, a happy Independence Day, yes.
Without beating around the bush, what is wrong with the structure of this country? 65-year-old, and it does look like that 65-year-old Nigerian has kwashiorkor, has a terrible growth problem, as a side problem, vision problem. But it didn't start like that. It was a child that has a lot of prospect. But 65 years later, what exactly is the problem with this country called Nigeria?
It's not the structure. It's the people who are operating the structure. And if you look back to even pre-colonial times when the British were pulling out, politicians were operating within some framework that enabled them or made them to be accountable. I think over the years, that accountability has continued to break down, and the levels of impunity have risen. Politicians are operating within a structure. Are they respecting the requirements of that structure? The answer is no. It looks like continuously politicians are continuously inventing and reinventing ways to subvert the framework of operations of government in this country. And that's why you mentioned the Constitution. Yes, I have been involved in the constitution-making process, starting from the first Constitution, the 1999 Constitution, the first Constitution in this Fourth Republic. I have been involved at every stage of amendment and alteration of it. And why are these alterations taking place? It's because each time you have one alteration, the politicians devise a way of subverting it. And so we come up with new measures, new provisions, new suggestions on how to cover and avoid those manipulations by politicians. It's a continuous thing. You talk about decamping from one party to the other, for instance. It's very clear in the Constitution. If you're a legislator, you shouldn't constitutionally run off to another party. The Constitution forbids it. But the politicians have found a way of going around it. And so you continuously have politicians decamping, and you have all sorts of subversion of the Constitution. So that's really what the problem is. It's not the Constitution. It's not the structure.
Is Nigeria working?
At this time, I think there are huge challenges. I think that the framework under which we should work very effectively is not happening. And the politicians are becoming much more arbitrary, much more impudent, and much more violative of the tenets of the Constitution, but also the letter and spirit of the Constitution.
So, and I'm asking this pointed question because we don't need to beat around the bush. We know this country so well. We are all Nigerians and we know ourselves. Let's strip in the closet right now and let us see our nakedness for what it is, and let's be able to tell ourselves the real truth. the most populous nation in Africa, and we are by independence older than some of the countries that have now overtaken us. So in fact, some of these countries, we helped them. We were very much responsible in the growth and in how some of these countries are flourishing. But here we are. We are a country that it keeps repeating one class, failing one class, staying in one position over and over again. You said, on one hand, the people are the problem because it's not much of a structure. But why have we argued for restructuring? Oh, the kind of federalism. And that brings me first to, before I go to why you telling us why are people agitating for a change of structure, is the big question around whether or not we've attempted different style of governance under a democratic rule. Federalism or presidential system is not the one that is not the first that we attempted. We've done a few, one or two others. But the question is that, is federalism and presidential system of government, in your own view and your own experience, Mr. Nwankwo, the best suit for our structure?
Now, we practice what we call the parliamentary system. But the parliamentary system was, again, first past to the post. Whoever wins a constituency election gets in. Who loses is out. The presidential system is the same thing. It's not like a proportional representation system of government as perhaps you practice in South Africa. So because everybody wants to win, everybody wants to get in, you do all sorts of things. All sorts of things means that the institutions that guides election continuously been compromised. I started out as a lawyer who was told that the law is the last hope of the common person. The judiciary is the last hope of the common person. Today, the courts don't work. The courts don't work. If you have a grievance as a plaintiff, a complainant, you go to court. You could be in court for 20 years. And I'm not talking of political cases. If it's a political case, the question arises whether judges are being bought and compromised by the politicians. So in all reality, our judiciary has collapsed. The legislature, which should be, as we are taught in the Constitution, the check and balance between the executive and the legislature. The legislature carries out oversight. What is the executive doing? What should the legislature do? It's collapsed. The legislature has difficulty getting the executive to do what it should do, to be accountable. The Electoral Commission has collapsed. Citizens don't have confidence or faith in the Electoral Commission.
Everything has collapsed because you virtually mentioned literally everything.
Quite frankly, because you would say, as a citizen, a politician has not delivered on the promise or expectation that you have of them. Okay, I'll wait for him in the next elections. I'll wait for her in the next elections. And then the next election comes. What happens? You go to vote, you look at the result that is announced. It has nothing to do with the way the votes happened.
I'm a student of political science, and I imagine the principle, and a student of law too, so I imagine what we are, it looks like we are a confused state right now in terms of the system of government we want to practice, because we cannot succeed or flourish if we are not very certain about what we want and how we want it. It looks, on one hand, there is a unitary style that we are operating. It suits us when we make our president or the executive arm of government one of the most powerful entities in the world, can make them come out. And on one hand, we mount how we want to operate a federal state. And a federal state, in the real sense, how the central government operates in Nigeria. And I've done case studies in my study. I did a comparative analysis in one of my advanced degrees on 4 federal states: South Africa, Canada, Nigeria, the United States. Nigeria doesn't look as much as a federal state that it should be. Are we a unitary state on one hand? We love parliamentary, we love federal. What exactly? Sometimes you look like a confederate. What exactly are we? What suits us? That's a big question. We look confused here.
I think, given our recent history, you had military rule for 13 years. That military administration ended. And General Abdul Salam Abubakar, who was the last military head of state, handed over to General Olusegun Obasanjo, who had himself been a dictator. So that transition from a very brutal military era where arbitrariness was reigning didn't quite happen. Yes, there were institutions, there were efforts to try and get President Obasanjo, and he's very accomplished as a former president of this country, and I totally commend all of his efforts. But when he took over, he had the toga of coming from himself, the military background. So that transition to civilian rule didn't quite happen.
Unusual.
And so, because you've had a unitary system of government, which was worsened under the dictator, General Buhari, and General Ibrahim Babangida, and worsened, of course, by the dictator, the brutal dictator, General Abacha, you just didn't see a return to civilianness. And every president since General Olusegun Obasanjo in 1999 have operated using the machinery that was left behind by the military to continue to operate this country as a unitary system. And so the struggle to decentralize, the struggle to de-escalate the unitary system has been a continuous one. And because of the struggle between the center and the states, where the center actually arbitrarily dictates how the country is run, we haven't had that independence.
So military brought us to where we are today.
The military, very sadly, brought us to where we are today.
Those interregnums are a major disaster.
They have been a major disaster to this country, and that's why you cannot but be quite angry about where the civilians are today with administration.